Chapter 21 of A Cousin's Conspiracy, or A Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 21 Out of the Frying Pan. Arrived at the opening, Ernest found that there was a trap door, which, through carelessness, had been left open. It was, however, a serious problem to draw himself up so as to profit by what he had already done. Twice he failed and nearly lost his grip on the rope. Then he caught hold of the projection from which the rope depended, and by a supreme effort he succeeded, helping himself by means of the trap door in emerging from his subterranean prison. Stretching himself, he took a deep breath and realized joyfully not only that he was free, but that he had recovered the valuable bonds of which he had been placed in charge. He began to look around him, and tried to conjecture in what direction he must go to reach Lee's Falls. He was quite at a loss, as he had been carried into the cave blindfolded. But help seemed to be at hand. He saw at a little distance, rapidly approaching him, a man of middle height whom he concluded to be a resident of some place in the vicinity. "Can you tell me in what direction I must go to reach Lee's Falls?" he asked. The stranger paused and examined him. "So you want to go to Lee's Falls?" he said. "Yes, sir." "Where do you come from?" "From Emmonsville." "Direct?" "No." "I saw you just now coming out of some opening in the earth." This alarmed Ernest. He felt that he might be called upon to explain where he had been. "Who is this man?" he asked himself. "Is he one who is likely to be in the confidence of the outlaws? If so, I have only got out of one scrape to fall into another." He studied the face of the man with whom he was speaking, and to his dismay noted a resemblance to James Fox. He began to suspect that this was his brother. Whether it was or not, Ernest deemed it politic to say as little as possible of his experiences and of what he knew about the cave and its occupants. "Yes," he answered quietly. "There seems to be a cave underneath. I found the trap door open and went down, but I regretted it, for I found it difficult to get out again." His new acquaintance eyed him scrutinizingly, as if to see whether he knew more than he was willing to reveal. "So there is a cave underneath?" he said. "Yes." "Have you any idea what it is used for?" "I don't think it is used at all. The room below seems empty." The man regarded him fixedly. "When did you leave Emmonsville?" he asked abruptly. "Yesterday," answered Ernest in some confusion. "How does it happen that you have got no farther on your way to Lee's Falls?" "I stopped at the cabin of an Indian," answered Ernest, making the only explanation he could think of. The man smiled. "Young man," he said, "didn't you pass last night in this cave?" Ernest saw that there was no further chance for subterfuge. "Yes," he answered. "I thought so. You were captured?" the other went on. "Yes." "Have you any suspicion of whom this cave is occupied?" "I presume by the Fox brothers." "Correct. I am one of them." "I began to think so." "How were you able to escape?" "I was left with the little boy. He fell asleep, and then I began to explore." "Where is my brother?" "He went out quite early, I presume in search of you." "Exactly. I suppose my brother heard that I was in trouble?" "Yes." "By the way, the Quaker detective through whom I got into difficulty you doubtless know?" "I do." "I was put into jail at Crampton, but I managed to effect my escape. Are you connected in any way with the Emmonsville bank?" "Yes." "In what way?" "As bank messenger." "Did my brother take anything from you?" "Yes." "Money?" "No, bonds." "You are a sensible boy. You answer my questions freely. You are a smart boy, too. It isn't every lad of your age who would have managed to effect an escape from the cave. Do you remember the entrance?" "No, I was carried into it blindfolded." "I thought my brother would be prudent. So you couldn't find it again?" "No, I don't think so." "Still, I cannot run any risk. You will have to come with me." "Where do you want to carry me?" asked Ernest, much disturbed. "I will carry you back to the cave." Let me go free. I will promise not to reveal anything that I have discovered." "I am sorry, boy. You were made prisoner by my brother, and I owe it to him to prevent your escape." It was intolerable to Ernest to think of having his captivity renewed. He determined that he would at least make an effort for freedom. Accordingly, he did not hesitate, but started to run, hoping that in this way he might save himself. He had always the reputation among his boy companions as a sprinter, and resolved to see whether this was a lost art. "So that's your game, is it?" exclaimed the outlaw. "It will go hard with me if I don't catch you. Stop, or it will be the worse for you." But Ernest had no intention of giving up so soon. He only exerted himself the more. The contest was not so unequal as might have been supposed. Ernest was tall for his age, and the outlaw was rather below the average height, so there was in reality only about an inch difference in their height. On the other hand, John Fox had, as might be supposed, more strength and endurance. He was not overweight, and therefore not scant of breath. Ernest got the start, and his was an advantage. One ran about as fast as the other, so it settled down into a contest of endurance. The outlaw, however, was irritated at the unexpected difficulty of his undertaking. He had thought that Ernest would surrender. "I wish I had my revolver," he muttered. Had the outlaw been aware that Ernest had in his possession the packet of bonds which had impelled his brother to make him a captive, his zeal would have been increased. He knew, of course, that the bonds would be taken from him, and he could conceive of no chance of the boys recovering them. They flew over the ground, maintaining the same relative distance. But there was an unexpected contingency that worked to the disadvantage of Ernest. Directly in his path was a projecting root which in his haste escaped his notice. He tripped over it, and as a natural consequence he measured his length on the ground. The outlaw's face lighted up with exultation. Now the issue was no longer doubtful. Before Ernest could recover himself and rise to his feet, John Fox was upon him. He flung himself on the prostrate boy and clutched him in a firm grasp. "Now I have you," he said. "You were a fool to run. You might have known that you could not escape." "I came near it, though," gasped Ernest, quite out of breath. "Let me up." "Will you promise to go with me without giving me any more trouble?" "I will make no promises," said Ernest. "Then it will be the worse for you," said the outlaw vindictively. What he proposed to do must remain unknown, for as he spoke a hand was thrust into his neckcloth and he was jerked violently to his feet. Chapter 21. Of a Cousin's Conspiracy, or a Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 22. Castro to the rescue. Bewildered and angry, John Fox looked to see who was his assailant. He found himself confronted by a tall, muscular Indian, whom Ernest recognized as the man whose child he had saved from a watery grave. "What do you mean by this outrage?" demanded the outlaw angrily. "Why are you hurting him?" said the Indian, pointing to Ernest. "Because I choose to." "Me stop you," said the Indian calmly. "I have a great mind to shoot you." This was an empty threat, for his weapon had been taken by the Quaker detective. The only answer made by the Indian was to produce a revolver, which he pointed at the breast of the outlaw. "To play at that game," he answered. John Fox shrank back, for it takes a man of nerve to face a revolver. He began to remonstrate. "What interest have you in that boy?" he asked. "He saved my little boy from drowning," answered the Indian. "Will you go, or shall me shoot?" There was but one answer to make to this question. John Fox turned about and walked quietly away without a word. Ernest grasped the Indian's hand gratefully. "I can't thank you enough," he said. "You have perhaps saved my life." "You saved my little boy." "Do you know that man?" "No." "It was John Fox, one of the Fox brothers, the famous outlaws." "Humph! I have heard of him. How did he catch you?" Ernest told the story. He also told of the commission he had from the Emmonsville bank. "I am going to ask you a favor," he asked. "What is it?" "I want you to go with me to the bank at Lee's Falls. I have a package of bonds to carry there, and I don't think it safe to go alone. I will see that you are paid for your time and trouble." "I will go." Under the guidance of his Indian friend, Ernest reached Lee's Falls. The bank was closed, but the cashier was still in the bank building, having been detained after hours. Seeing him through the window, Ernest knocked and obtained admission. "The bank is closed, young man," said the bank officer. "I know it, but I have a package of bonds from the Emmonsville bank. I hope you will take them from me, for I don't want the responsibility of them any longer." "Oh, you are the bank messenger. We had advice that you would be here yesterday." "So I should have been, but for my capture by one of the Fox brothers." "How did you escape?" asked the wondering cashier. "Please take the bonds and I will tell you. I spent 2 nights in the outlaws' cave. This afternoon I managed to get away." "But were not the bonds taken from you?" "Yes, but I recovered them." Ernest, without waiting for further questions, told the story as briefly as possible. "So, after all," he concluded, "I should have been taken again but for my friend here," laying his hand upon the Indian's shoulder. "I told him you would pay him for his trouble and accompanied me." "So I will," said the cashier, and he took a $5 bill and tendered it to the Indian. The latter objected to taking it, alleging that Ernest had saved his boy's life, but the cashier overruled his objections, and he accepted it. They were going out of the bank when the familiar figure of Luke Robbins came up the street. His face was clouded by an expression of anxiety, and he seemed troubled. He had searched everywhere for Ernest, and thus far had failed to find him. When he saw the boy emerging from the bank, his face changed at once. "So you are safe, Ernest? I thought I had lost you," he exclaimed. "Did you see anything of the outlaws?" "I should say that I did. I was captured by James Fox and confined 2 nights in the underground haunts of the robbers. When I escaped this afternoon I fell into the clutches of the other brother." "What? John Fox?" "Yes." "This cannot be, Ernest. I lodged him myself in Crampton jail." "All I can tell you is that he is at liberty now. He must have escaped." "Then I am afraid I shan't receive the reward offered for his capture." "You ought to get it. You delivered him over to the authorities. If they could not keep him, that was their own lookout." "You ought to be right, lad. I hope you are. Who is this man?" "My Indian friend, who proved to be a friend in need. It was he who saved me from John Fox." "I am proud to know you," said Luke, grasping the hand of the red warrior. "If you have helped Ernest, you are my friend." "He saved my little boy. I will always be his friend." "You saved my boy, my Indian friend, and you will always be my friend," returned Luke. "Well, Luke, what shall we do? I have done my errand and delivered the bonds." "We will go back. I have found you and have no more to do here." "Shall we walk?" "No, it is too far. There is a stable a little way from here. I will hire a conveyance, and our Indian friend will perhaps be willing to drive us over." The Indian expressed his willingness, and the three were soon on their way through the woods. They met with no further adventure, nor did they fear any, for it would have required a brave man to attack 2 such stalwart men as the Indian and the Quaker detective. Leaving them for the present, we will go back to the cave from which Ernest had made so unceremonious a departure. Frank slept for 2 hours, but at length opened his eyes, expecting to see Ernest sitting at his bedside. He looked in vain. There was no one in the room. This did not surprise him much, however. He thought Ernest might have gone into the next apartment. "Ernest!" he cried, but his call received no response. The little boy got out of bed and looked about, but his search was vain. So he went into the kitchen, where he found Juba engaged in some domestic work. "Juba," he said, "where is Ernest?" "I don't know, child. Isn't he in the big room?" "No, Juba. I went to sleep, and when I woke up he was gone." "You look round and maybe you find him." But Frank was doomed to disappointment. He sat down ready to cry. He felt very lonely. He had not realized how much he enjoyed Ernest's company. "I don't know where he can have gone, Juba. Do you think he's gone and left me?" "I can't tell, chile. Wait till your papa comes home. He will find him." Frank had to wait an hour and a half before his father's return. All this time he was buoyed up by the hope that Ernest would come back. He was continually watching the portal to see if the runaway would not come. James Fox entered the room with grave face and heavy step. He had not heard of his brother's escape, and thought him still an inmate of Crampton jail. He looked about for his young captive. "Where is Ernest, Frank?" he asked. "I don't know, papa. I miss him ever so much," said the little boy tearfully. "But he must be somewhere about. When did you miss him?" "He went away when I was asleep." The outlaw's suspicions were aroused. "I will look for him," he said. But Ernest was in none of the rooms. "Did you walk with him into the interior of the cave, Frank?" he asked. "Yes, papa." "Ha, that explains it. Go with me and tell me just where you went." The little boy led the way through the vacant apartments till he reached the one through which the light came from above. The rope was still hanging from the projection, and this explained Ernest's escape. "He must have got out this way," said the outlaw. "Won't he come back, papa?" said Frank. "Yes," said his father resolutely. "I will bring him back." Chapter 23 of A Cousin's Conspiracy, or A Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 23. Given in Trust. "Well, lad, have you had enough of Evansville?" The speaker was Luke Robbins, and the time was 2 days after the series of exciting incidents recorded in the last few chapters. "Why do you ask, Luke?" replied Ernest. "Are you tired of it?" "Yes, lad, I want to move on." "But what about the reward you are entitled to for the capture of John Fox?" "The cashier thinks I will only receive a part of it, as Fox has escaped." "That is unlucky. You will have to wait until the matter is decided, won't you?" "No, he has offered me an advance of $100, and is authorized to collect whatever prize money may be awarded to me. You have some money left?" "Yes, about $75. "Then we both have enough to start on. I propose to go to California by train, getting there as soon as possible. When we reach there we will see what we can do to increase our pile." "I like that plan. When shall we go?" "We will start on Monday." Before they departed there was some sensational news. Peter Longman, one of the Fox band, taking offense at some slight put upon him by James Fox, went to the authorities and revealed the existence and location of the cave, with other information of like nature. The result was that a strong force was sent to surprise and capture the notorious outlaws. The visit was made at night and under guidance of Peter himself. Wholly unsuspicious of treachery, the outlaws were captured in their beds, and the valuable articles in the storeroom were confiscated. James Fox was reclining on the sofa when the officers entered. "Is your name Fox?" asked the leader of the invading party. "Yes," answered the outlaw proudly. "Then you are my prisoner." "Who has betrayed me?" demanded Fox quickly. There was no answer, but just behind the invading party the outlaw caught sight of Peter Longman, apparently trying to screen himself from observation. "I need not ask," he said. "There is the treacherous hound. He shall not live to profit by his baseness." Before anyone could interfere, James Fox leveled his revolver at Longman, and a sharp scream showed that his aim was true. His treacherous follower fell to the ground, mortally wounded. James Fox looked at him disdainfully, then threw the revolver upon the floor of the cave and held out his hands. "Now bind me if you will," he said. "I am your captive." Little Frank was a terrified witness of this scene. "What are they doing to you, papa?" he asked. "They are bad men." In spite of his fortitude, the outlaw showed traces of emotion. "That is my little son," he said to the lieutenant commanding. "He shall be taken care of. Do not be anxious about him." "There is an old colored woman here, Juba," went on the outlaw. "The boy is used to her. If possible, let them be together." Under a strong guard the famous robbers were carried to jail, and the cave which had been for years their meeting place was dismantled and was never again used for a criminal resort. When Ernest read the story his feelings were mixed. He rejoiced that the outlaws were taken, but he felt a sympathy for little Frank, and understood what a shock it must be to the father and son to be separated. He learned where Frank was and called upon him. He had been taken to his own home by the leader of the raiding force. When he entered the room where Frank sat disconsolately at the window, the little fellow uttered a cry of joy. "Is it you, Ernest?" he said, running forward. "I thought I should never see you again." Ernest stooped over and kissed him. "You see, I am here," he said. "What made you go away? Why didn't you tell me where you were going?" "I will tell you some time, Frank." "Why did those bad men take papa away?" "I do not think you would understand. Where is Juba?" "She is in the kitchen. I will call her." Juba came in and seemed pleased to see Ernest. "I have got a letter for you, honey," she said, fumbling in her pocket. She brought out a yellow envelope. It was directed to Ernest. The contents ran thus: "Now that misfortune has come upon me, my chief thought is for my boy. Whatever befalls me, I want him cared for. You are scarcely more than a stranger to me, but when you were in the cave you seemed to love Frank. Poor boy, he will stand in need of some friend who loves him. So far as you can, will you be his friend and guardian? He has some property, a few $1,000, which you will hold in trust for him. It is not stolen property. It was left him by his mother. Call upon Mr. Samuel Hardy, a lawyer in Lee's Falls, and he will make over to you the custody of the money, and look upon you as the authorized guardian of Frank. You know my wish that he should be sent to a good school and properly educated. Will you carry out my wishes in that respect? I do not wish to tie you down, but wherever you may go keep up an active interest in my boy, and from time to time write to him. I do not know what my fate may be. I am not a coward, and shall not complain or beg for mercy. When you speak of me to Frank in after years, always paint me at my best, and let him understand that at least I loved him. James Fox. P.S. Should Frank die before maturity, I desire that his property should go to you. Ernest read the foregoing with mingled feelings. He knew that the writer was an outlaw, deeply stained with crime, but this letter showed him at his best. Paternal love softened the harsh outlines of his character, and spoke of a nature that might have made him a blessing instead of a curse to his kind. Ernest lost no time in communicating with Mr. Hardy. The lawyer read the letter in some surprise. "Mr. Fox seems to have appointed a young guardian for his son," he remarked. "Yes, sir, but he appeared to have no choice." "I am ready to assist you, however," said Mr. Hardy. "I will depend upon you then, for I shall start for California as soon as possible. Can you recommend a satisfactory boarding school?" "I have a son at school in Lincoln. The school is under the charge of a clergyman who is an efficient teacher." "Can you arrange to enter Frank at his school?" "I will do so if you authorize me." "I don't think we can do any better. Were you aware that Mr. Fox was the notorious outlaw?" asked Ernest after a pause. "I did not know, but latterly I have suspected it. You may be surprised that under the circumstances I should have consented to serve him, but I felt that I might be of assistance to the boy, and that my refusal would occasion him embarrassment. Your letter is satisfactory as showing that the fortune of your ward is not made up of ill-gotten gains. Were it otherwise, he would hardly be allowed to keep it. Does Frank know his father's character and reputation?" "I don't think so." "It had best be kept from him. I will see that it does not become known at school. It would wound the boy to be twitted with it by his schoolmates." Thanks to Mr. Hardy, Ernest found that the new charge imposed upon him would not materially interfere with his plans. A week later than he had originally intended, he and Luke Robbins left Emmonsville. As they rushed rapidly over the prairies, Luke Robbins turned to his young companion and said, "Our journey thus far has been adventurous. I wonder what lies before us." "We won't trouble ourselves on that score, Luke. I feel hopeful." "So do I, and yet we have less than $200 between us." "That's true." "Still, I have captured an outlaw, and you at the age of 16 are the guardian of an outlaw's son." "I don't think we shall meet with anything stranger than that." 2 days later, in a newspaper bought at an important station, there was an article that deeply interested both travelers. It related to the Fox brothers, recounting their daring attempt to escape from the jail where they were confined. John Fox got away, but James was shot dead by one of the prison guards. So Frank was an orphan, and Ernest now felt that his responsibility was increased. End of chapter 23. Of a Cousin's Conspiracy, or a Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 24. Stephen Ray and his son. Leaving Ernest and Luke Robbins on their way to California, our attention is called to other characters who must play a part in the drama of the Boy from Oak Forks. A few miles from Elmira, upon an eminence from which there was a fine view of the surrounding country, stood the handsome country mansion of Stephen Ray, already referred to as the cousin of Ernest's father. It passed into his possession by inheritance from poor Ernest's grandfather, the will under which the bequest was made cutting off his son for no worse crime than marrying a girl thoroughly respectable but of humble birth. Stephen Ray, since he came into possession of his uncle's estate, had improved it considerably. He had torn down the old stable and built an imposing new one. The plain carriage which had satisfied his uncle had been succeeded by an elegant coach, and the slow horse by a pair of spirited steeds. Mr. Ray had become pompous, and by his manner made it clear that he considered himself a man of great consequence. He was a local magistrate, and had for years endeavored to obtain a nomination for Congress. Had he been of popular manners, he would probably have succeeded, but he was not a favorite among the poorer classes, and their vote must be considered. There is an old saying, "Like father, like son," and Clarence, now turned 16, the only child of the country magnate, was like his father in all objectionable qualities. He was quite as much impressed with ideas of his own consequence. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Mr. Ray sat on the piazza, the day being unusually warm, reading a newspaper. In the street near by, his son Clarence was moving swiftly on a new velocipede, which his father had just purchased for him. "Out of the way there!" he called out, as a shabbily dressed stranger with a weary step plodded along the pathway. Whether because he was hard of hearing or because his mind was preoccupied, the stranger did not heed the warning, and Clarence, who might easily have avoided the collision, ran into him recklessly. Had the wheel been moving at a greater rate of speed, he might have been seriously hurt. As it was, he was nearly thrown down. But he rallied, and seizing the offending rider with no gentle grasp, dragged him from the wheel and shook him vigorously. "Let me alone, you tramp!" exclaimed Clarence furiously. But the stranger did not release his hold. "Not till you apologize for running into me," he answered sternly. "Apologize to a man like you!" ejaculated Clarence, struggling furiously for his freedom. "Will you apologize?" "There is no need of any apology. You got in my way." You have no business on the sidewalk with your wheel. It is meant for foot passengers." "Do you know who I am?" demanded Clarence haughtily. "No, I don't, nor do I care." "I am Clarence Ray, the son of Squire Stephen Ray. He is a magistrate, and he can send you to jail." These words of Clarence had the effect he desired. The stranger released him and eyed him with close scrutiny. "So you are the son of Stephen Ray?" he said. "Yes. What have you to say now?" "That you had no right to run into me, whoever your father may be." "I shall report your insolence to my father. I shall charge you with violently assaulting me." "I might have known you were Stephen Ray's son," said the stranger thoughtfully. "Do you know my father?" asked Clarence. "I am on my way to call upon him." "I don't think it will do any good. He never gives money to tramps." "I have a great mind to give you another shaking up," said the old man, and in some fear Clarence edged away from him. It was evident that his shabby looking stranger had not a proper respect for those who were in a higher station. "I will tell him not to give you anything," continued Clarence. "Like father, like son," said the stranger thoughtfully, apparently not disturbed by the boy's threats. Evidently he was no common tramp, or he would have been more respectful to the son of the man from whom he was probably about to ask a favor. "You just wait till you see my father. He'll give you a lecture that you won't soon forget." "You'd better get on your wheel, boy, and go right along," said the stranger calmly. "Do you know where my father lives?" "Yes, at yonder fine house. I see him sitting on the piazza. Shall we go along together?" "No, I don't keep such company as you." "And yet some day you may be as poor and friendless as myself." "That isn't very likely. My father is a very rich man." "I knew him when he was poor." More and more puzzled by the impudent manner of this shabby stranger, Clarence made a spurt and soon found himself in the grounds of his father's house. "With whom were you talking, Clarence?" asked Stephen Ray, as his son joined him on the piazza. "One of the most impudent tramps I ever came across," answered Clarence. "He made an attack upon me and pulled me from my bicycle." Stephen Ray's cheek flamed with anger. An insult to his son was an insult to him. "Why did he do this? How dared he?" "Because I happened to touch him as I passed," answered Clarence. "He actually pulled you from your bicycle?" asked Stephen, almost incredulous. "Yes." "I should like to meet him. I should feel justified in ordering his arrest." "You will have a chance to meet him. He told me he was going to call upon you. There he is now, entering the gate." Stephen was glad to hear it. He wanted to empty the veils of his wrath on the audacious offender. He was accustomed to seeing men of the stamp of this stranger quail before him and show nervous alarm at his rebukes. He had no doubt that his majestic wrath would overwhelm the shabby outcast who had audaciously assaulted his son and heir. He rose to his feet and stood the personification of haughty displeasure as the poor man who dared his anger walked composedly up the path. He now stood by the piazza steps. "It is well you have come here," began the squire in a dignified tone. "My son tells me that you have committed an unprovoked outrage upon him in dragging him from his wheel. I can only conclude that you are under the influence of liquor." Stephen Ray waited curiously to hear what the man would say. He was prepared for humble apologies. "I am no more drunk than yourself, if that is what you mean, Stephen Ray." Squire Ray was outraged and scandalized. "You must be drunk or you would not dare to talk in this way. Who authorized you to address me in this familiar way?" "You are only a man, I believe, Stephen Ray. I have addressed you as respectfully as you have spoken to me." "Respect to you!" repeated Mr. Ray disdainfully. "Has the time come when we must be respectful to tramps?" "A poor tramp is quite as deserving of respect as a rich rascal." "What do you mean by that?" demanded the squire suspiciously. "It was a general remark." "It is well that it was, but it has no application in the present instance. If you are poor I will give you a quarter, but only on condition that you apologize to my son." The stranger laughed. "Why should I apologize to your son?" he asked. "You pulled him off his wheel. Do you deny it?" "No, I do not. Do you know what he did?" "He brushed against you with his wheel, he tells me, accidentally." "So that is his version of it. He deliberately ran into me." "I gave you warning. I said, 'Out of the way there!'" interrupted Clarence. "Yes, but you had no right on the sidewalk." "It seems to me, sir, that you are remarkably impudent for a man of your rank," said Stephen Ray. "Even if it had been as you say, you had no right to assault my son. I might have you arrested on your own confession, but I will forbear doing so on condition that you leave town at once." "I have a little business with you first." "If you expect alms, you have come to the wrong man." "I know very well that you are not charitable. I used to be acquainted with you." "Who are you?" "My name is Benjamin Bolton." Stephen Ray looked startled. "Benjamin Bolton!" he repeated, half incredulous. "I can't believe it." Chapter 24. Of a Cousin's Conspiracy or a Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 25. A Startling Disclosure. "Look at me closely, Stephen Ray," said the stranger. "I think you will see some traces of the Bolton you used to know." Stephen Ray did examine his visitor closely. Against his will he was obliged to acknowledge the resemblance of the man before him to one who in past times had had an intimate acquaintance with his affairs. "You may be Benjamin Bolton," he said after a pause, "but if so, you have fallen off greatly in your appearance. When I first knew you, you were well dressed and respectable, I suppose you mean to say?" "Well, respectable, if you will have it so. Now you look more like a tramp than a lawyer." "True as gospel, every word of it. But it isn't too late to mend. There's an old proverb, and a true one. It is quite in the line of possibility that I should get back to the position from which I fell." "Perhaps so, but I am not very sanguine of it." "With your help, nothing is impossible." "You must not count upon that," said Stephen Ray stiffly. "It is a good while since we parted company. I don't myself care to renew the acquaintance." "But I do," rejoined Bolton with emphasis. "I have very little time at my disposal," said Ray, pulling out an elegant watch and consulting it. "I think it may be well for you to spare me a little time," went on Bolton quietly. There was something in his tone that sounded like a threat, and Stephen Ray could not wholly conceal his uneasiness. "Well," he said, "I will give you 10 minutes. Get through your business, whatever it is, as soon as possible." "Hadn't you better send your son away?" suggested Bolton significantly. "Why should I?" But on second thoughts Mr. Ray concluded to act on the hint, and turning to Clarence he said, "Clarence, you might take another spin on your wheel." This did not suit Clarence at all. His curiosity had been excited by his father's change of front toward the objectionable stranger, and he counted on finding out the reason for it. "Why can't I stay?" he grumbled. "This man and I have a little private business together." He spoke firmly, and Clarence knew by his tone that further remonstrance would be unavailing. So with a dissatisfied look he left the room. "Now, sir," said Stephen Ray sharply, when his son had taken his departure, "I gave you 10 minutes. You will need to be expeditious." "It will take more than 10 minutes, what I have to say," returned Bolton coolly. I am rather tired of standing, so you excuse me if I sit down." As he spoke he dropped into a comfortable chair 3 feet from his host. "Confound his impudence," thought Ray, much annoyed. "I think we had better go indoors," he said. He did not care to be seen in an apparently friendly conversation with a man like Bolton. "I think myself it may be better." Bolton followed Ray into a room which the latter used as a library and office, and took care to select a comfortable seat. "Really, Stephen Ray," he remarked, glancing around him at the well-filled bookcases, the handsome pictures, and the luxurious furniture, "you are very nicely fixed here." "I suppose you didn't come to tell me that," responded Stephen Ray with a sneer. "Well, not altogether, but it is well to refer to it. I have known you a good many years. I remember when you first came here to visit your uncle in the character of a poor relation. I don't believe you had $100 to your name." Such references grated upon the purse-proud aristocrat, who tried to persuade himself that he had always been as prosperous as at present. "There is no occasion for your reminiscences," he said stiffly. "No, I suppose you don't care to think of those days now. Your cousin Dudley, a fine young man, was a year or two older. Who would have thought that the time would come when you, the poor cousin, would be reigning in his place?" "If that is all you have to say, our interview may as well close." "It isn't all I have to say. I must indulge in a few more reminiscences, though you dislike them. A few years passed. Dudley married against his father's wishes. That is, his father did not approve of his selection, and he fell out of favor. As he lost favor, you gained it." "That is true enough, but it is an old story." "Does it seem just that an own son should be disinherited and a stranger—" "A near relative," corrected Stephen Ray. "Well, a near relative, but less near than an only son. Does it seem right that Dudley should have been disinherited and you put in his place?" "Certainly. My cousin disobeyed his father." "So he was left in poverty." "I don't see how that concerns you, Benjamin Bolton. My uncle had the right to dispose of his property as he pleased." "Probably Dudley Ray is living in poverty now." "You are mistaken. He is dead," said Stephen Ray. "Indeed? Poor fellow. He was a generous and high-minded man." "Whatever he may have been, he offended his father and suffered the consequences." "Too true," said Bolton. "But I fail to understand why you should have come to discuss the matter with me." "When did Dudley die?" "I can't be sure as to the year. I think it was about a year after his father's death." "I presume that his father's injustice helped to hasten his end," remarked Bolton. "I won't permit any reflections upon my dear uncle and benefactor. He did what he liked with his own. He felt that the estate would be better in my hands than in Dudley's." "Admitting for a moment that this was so, did your heart prompt you to bestow a part of the estate on your unfortunate cousin?" "No, for I am sure my uncle would have disapproved of such action on my part." "Do you know if he suffered much from poverty?" "No, I do not concern myself with that, nor need you." "I would like to comment on one of your statements. You say that your uncle had a right to dispose of his estate as he pleased. Do you dispute it?" "No, I agree with you. Stephen Ray, was his estate disposed of according to his wishes?" Mr. Ray started and his face became flushed. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean that he bequeathed the estate to his son, and you took possession of it." Bolton spoke slowly and eyed Stephen Ray keenly. "Are you mad?" gasped Stephen. "How could I do that? His will, devising the estate to me, was duly probated, and I entered upon my inheritance by due process of law." "I know such a will was probated." "Then what have you to say?" demanded Stephen Ray defiantly. "Do you mean to deny that the will was genuine?" "No." "Because if you do, you can go to the probate office and submit the will to any judge of my uncle's handwriting." "There will be no occasion. I admit that the will was written by him." "What do you mean, then?" asked Stephen Ray, showing relief. "I mean this, that it was not his last will and testament." "Where is the latter one? Produce it if you can," said Stephen Ray triumphantly. "You say this fearlessly because you found a later will and destroyed it." "It is a vile slander." "No, I will swear that such a will was made." "If it was destroyed, he destroyed it himself." "No, he did not. I am willing to swear that when he died, that will was in existence." "I don't think your swearing will do much good," sneered Stephen Ray. "Perhaps so, but one thing has not occurred to you." "What is that?" "A duplicate of the last will was placed in my hands. That will exists today." Stephen Ray started violently. "I don't believe it," he said. "Seeing is believing." "Then bring it here and let me see it. However, there is one material circumstance that would make it of no value." "What is it?" "My cousin Dudley is dead, and so is his son Ernest. There would be no one to profit by the production of the alleged will." Bolton was quite taken aback by this statement, as Stephen Ray perceived, and he plumed himself on the success of his falsehood. "When did the boy die?" asked Bolton. "About 5 years ago." "And where?" "At Savannah," answered Ray glibly. "What should have taken him down there?" "I am not positive, but I believe after his father's death a Southern gentleman became interested in him and took him to Georgia, where the poor boy died." Bolton looked keenly at the face of his companion and detected an expression of triumph about the eyes which led him to doubt the truth of his story. But he decided not to intimate his disbelief. "That was sad," he said. "Yes, and as you will see, even had your story about the will been true, it would have made no difference in the disposal of the property. Still, the revelation of your complicity in the suppression of the last will would injure your reputation, Mr. Ray." "I can stand it," answered Ray with assumed indifference. "You see, my dear fellow, you have brought your wares to the wrong market. Of course you are disappointed." "Yes, especially as I am dead broke." "No doubt." "And it prompts me to take my chances with the will in spite of the death of the rightful heirs." "What do you propose to do?" "Lay the matter before a shrewd lawyer of my acquaintance." Stephen Ray looked uneasy. The lawyer might suggest doubts as to the truth of his story concerning Ernest's decease. "That would be very foolish," he said. "Would it? Then perhaps you can suggest a better course." "You are a man of education and have been a lawyer yourself. Get a place in the office of some attorney and earn an honest living." "You see how I am dressed. Who would employ me in this garb?" "There is something in what you say. I feel for you, Bolton. Changed as you are, you were once a friend. I certainly haven't any reason to feel friendly to you, especially as you come here with the intention of extorting money from me, but I can make allowance for you in your unfortunate plight, and am willing to do something for you. Bring me the document you say you possess, and I will give you $100. Bolton eyed his prosperous companion with a cunning smile. "No, Stephen Ray, I prefer to keep the will," he replied, "though I can do nothing with it. Give me the money unconditionally, and if I get on my feet, you will have nothing to fear from me." Chapter 26 of A Cousin's Conspiracy, or A Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 26. Bought Off. Bolton's reply did not quite suit Mr. Ray, but he felt that if he said too much about the will, it would give it an exaggerated importance in the eyes of the man before him. So he answered carelessly, "I will give you the $100, but I wish it understood that it is all I can give you at any time. Don't apply to me again, for it will be of no use." "I understand," said Bolton non-committally. "Shall I give you a check?" "I could do better with the money. My name is not known now at any bank." "Well, I think I can accommodate you. I believe I have that sum in my desk." He opened a drawer in his secretary and produced $100 in crisp new bills. They had been taken from the bank the day before for a different purpose. Bolton took them joyfully. It was long since he had so much money in his possession. He had been his own worst enemy. Once a prosperous lawyer, he had succumbed to the love of drink and gradually lost his clients and his position. But he had decided to turn over a new leaf, and he saw in this money the chance to reinstate himself and in time recover his lost position. "Thank you," he said, but while there was relief, there was no gratitude in his tone. "And now," said Stephen Ray, "I must ask you to leave me. I have important business to attend to. You will excuse me if I suggest it would be better to go away to a distance and try to build yourself up somewhat where you are not known." "I might go to Savannah." "Yes, to Savannah, if you think it will be to your advantage," said Ray with equanimity. The other noticed his manner, and he said to himself, "He is willing to have me visit Savannah. It is clear that Ernest did not die there." Benjamin Bolton left the house in a pleasant frame of mind. It was not the sum which he had received that exhilarated him. He looked upon it only as the first installment. It was clear that Stephen Ray feared him, for he was not an open-handed man, and would not have parted with his money unnecessarily. Bolton had not arranged his campaign, but he was determined to raise himself in the world by playing on the fears of the man he had just visited. "I wonder," he said to himself, "whether Dudley Ray's son is dead. If so, the document is of no value, and though I should prefer to have it, I won't insist. He was a strong and healthy boy, and he may still be living." This was a point not easy to ascertain. He went to a restaurant and obtained a substantial meal, of which he stood very much in need. Then he went out for a stroll. He did not purpose to leave the place yet. As he was walking along, he met Clarence Ray again, and not on his wheel. The boy recognized him. "Are you going to stay in the town?" asked Clarence curiously. "Not long." "Did you get through your business with Pa?" "Yes, for the present. I suppose you know that you have a cousin about your own age? I used to know him and his father." "Did you? His father is dead." "So I have understood. Do you happen to know where the son is?" "Somewhere out west, I think." Bolton pricked up his ears. So it seemed that Stephen Ray had deceived him. "I would give $5 to know where he is," he said slowly. "Have you got $5?" Clarence asked doubtfully. By way of answer, Bolton took a roll of bills from his pocket. They were those which Stephen Ray had given him. "Do you mean it?" asked Clarence in a more respectful tone. "Yes, I mean it." "Why didn't you ask Pa?" "He never liked the boy nor his father, and I don't think he would tell me." "That is true. He didn't like either of them." "I suppose you couldn't find out for me?" "I don't know but I could," answered Clarence brusquely. He had a special use for $5, and it quite struck him that he might just as well earn the money offered by the stranger. "If you could, I would cheerfully pay you the $5. You see, I used to know Ernest Ray and his father, and I would be pleased to meet them again." "Just so," said Clarence complacently. "How long are you going to remain in town?" I did think of going to Elmira tonight, but I think on the whole I will stay at the hotel here till tomorrow morning." "That will give me time to find out," said Clarence. "All right. You had better not ask your father, for I don't think he would tell you." "That's so. He will be going out this evening, and then I will search in his desk. I saw a letter there once in which the boy's name was mentioned. But I say, if you've got money, why don't you buy some new clothes?" "Your suggestion is a good one," said Bolton, smiling. "Come to look at myself, I do appear shabby. But then I'm no dude. I dare say when you rode into me this morning you took me for a tramp." "Well, you did look like one." "That's so. I can't blame you." "Shall I find you at the hotel this evening?" "Yes." "Then I'll see what I can do." About 7 o'clock Squire Ray went out to attend to a business meeting, and Clarence was left in possession of the study. He locked the door and began to ransack his father's desk. At length he succeeded in his quest. Benjamin Bolton was sitting in the public room of the hotel an hour later, smoking a cigar and from time to time looking toward the door. Presently Clarence entered. "Have you got it?" asked Bolton eagerly. "Yes," nodded Clarence. He took a piece of paper from his vest pocket and handed it to Bolton. It read thus: Ernest Ray, Oak Forks, Iowa. "How did you get it?" asked Bolton. "I found a letter in Pa's desk from an old man named Peter Brant, asking Pa for some money for the boy who was living with him." "When was that letter written?" "About 2 years ago." "Thank you. This gives me a clue. Come out of doors and I will give you what I promised. It isn't best that anyone should think we had dealings together." 5 minutes later Clarence started for home, happy in the possession of a $5 bill. "I never paid any money more cheerfully in my life," mused Bolton. "Now I must find the boy." Chapter 27 of A Cousin's Conspiracy, or A Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 27. Orville. When Ernest and Luke Robbins started for California, they had no very definite plans as to the future. But they found among their fellow passengers a man who was just returning from the East, where he had been to visit his family. He was a practical and successful miner, and was by no means reluctant to speak of his success. "When I landed in 'Frisco," he said, "2 years ago I had just $40 left after paying the expenses of my trip. I couldn't find anything to do in the city, so I set out for the mines." "Where did you go?" asked Luke, becoming interested. "To Orville. At least, that's what they call it now. Then it didn't have a name." "I hope you prospered," said Ernest. "Well, not just at first, but luck came after a while. When I reached the mines I was dead broke, and went to work for somebody else. After a while I staked out a claim for myself. Well, I won't go into particulars, but I've got $6,000 salted down with a trust company in 'Frisco, and I've got a few $100 about my clothes besides." "That's the place for us, Ernest," said Luke. "So I think," answered Ernest. "Do you want to go to the mines?" asked the miner. "Yes, we have our fortunes to make, and are willing to work." "Then go out to Orville with me. Have you got any money?" "We have enough to get there, and perhaps a little over." "That will do. I'll set you to work on one of my claims. We will share and share alike. How will that suit you?" "It seems fair. Do you think we can make enough to live upon?" "That depends partly on yourselves and partly on luck." "At any rate, we are willing to work," said Ernest. "Then I'm your friend, and will help you," said the miner heartily. "Tom Ashton never goes back on his friends." This was very encouraging. Luke and Ernest were not dead broke, but were near it. They had less than $40 between them, and they had already found out that living was high in California. They remained but a day in San Francisco, and then started for Orville with Mr. Ashton. The two friends knew nothing of mining, But, as practiced in those days, it took very little time to learn. They found that their new friend was a man of consideration at Orville. He owned several claims, and had no difficulty in finding them employment. They set out to work at once, for they were almost penniless. It may easily be supposed that the miners were not fastidious about living. The cabins or huts which they occupied were primitive to the last degree. Generally they did their own cooking, such as it was. 3 of these cabins Tom Ashton owned, and one was assigned to the use of Ernest and his friend. For years Ernest, with his old friend and supposed uncle, Peter Brant, had lived in a cabin at Oak Forks, but it was superior to their new residence. Yet this former experience enabled him the better to accommodate himself to the way of living at Orville. For a month the 2 friends worked steadily at their claim, which Ashton had finally given them. They made little. In fact, it was with difficulty that they made expenses. "It will be a long time before we make our pile, Ernest," said Luke one evening, as he sat in front of his cabin smoking. "Yes, Luke, things don't look very promising," replied Ernest gravely. "If it weren't for my pipe I should feel blue." "That is where you have the advantage of me, Luke." "You have the same chance that I have. I have an extra pipe. Won't you take a smoke?" Ernest shook his head. "I think I'm better off without it." "Perhaps you're right, lad. I remember my poor father warned me against smoking. The question is, how long we'd better keep at it. Is there anything else, Luke?" "Well, no, not here." "And we haven't money enough to get away." Just then a tall man with reddish hair strode across the field to their cabin. "Good evening, neighbors," he said. "How are you making out?" "Not over well," answered Luke. "There's a difference in claims. You've got a poor one." "Probably you're right." "There's been considerable gold dust gathered in Orville within 6 months. I have been one of the lucky ones." "Indeed, I'm glad of it." "Yes, I found a nugget 2 months since that I sold for $2,000. I have made $5,000 within a year." "You've been in luck. I wish the boy and I could be as successful." "The claim is not good enough to support 2. Why not let the boy find something else?" "You wouldn't have me freeze him out?" said Luke in a tone of displeasure. "No, but suppose I find something for him to do. What then?" "That's a different matter. Have you an extra claim?" "Yes, but that isn't what I offer him. I have a plan in which he can help me." "What is it?" "All our supplies come from Sacramento. What we need is a retail store in Orville, a general store for the sale of almost everything that miners need." "It would be a good plan to open one," said Luke approvingly. "Now, you must know that I am an old storekeeper. I had for years a store about 20 miles from Boston. I succeeded fairly with it, but my health gave out. The doctor told me I must not be so confined, that I needed out-of-door exercise. So I came out here and got it. Well, the advice proved good. I am strong and robust, and I feel enterprising. Now, what I propose is this. I will open a store and put the boy in charge under me." "I should like it," said Ernest eagerly. "You know what we pay for supplies. There's at least 100% made, and no one objects to the prices. Why shouldn't we make it as well as the Sacramento storekeepers?" "True," said Luke. "I don't ask you to work for me, my friend, for I don't think it would suit you." "It wouldn't. At home, that's in Oak Forks, Iowa. I was a hunter. I was always in the open air. The sort of life here suits me, though I haven't made much money as yet." "The boy, I think, would do. He looks like a hustler. I need only look at his face to know that he'd be honest and faithful. What is your name, boy?" "Ernest Ray." "That's a good name. You'll only have to live up to it, to the first part of it, I mean. Then you accept my offer?" "You haven't made any," said Ernest, smiling. "Oh, you mean about wages. Well, I don't offer any stated wages. I will give you 1/3 profits, and then your pay will depend on your success. The fact is, you are to keep the store." Ernest looked in inquiry. "One person can attend to it by day. I will come in the evening and take a general look after things. Just at first I'll stay with you till you've got the hang of things, but during the day I shall be looking after my claims. Do you know how to keep books?" "I understand single entry bookkeeping." "That will be all you will require." "How soon shall you start?" asked Ernest, who began to feel very much interested. "I will go to Sacramento tomorrow, now that we have come to terms. You know that frame building near Ashton's cabin?" "Yes." "I don't know what it was originally used for, but it is empty, and I can secure it for our store. It isn't large, but it will hold all we need." "Yes, that will do." "You haven't said how you like my offer." "Of 1/3 profits, I like it better than if you paid me wages. I will make it amount to a good deal." "That will suit me. I don't care how much you make out of it, for I shall make twice as much." "How did you happen to think of me?" "I've watched you ever since you came. I can judge of anyone, man or boy, if I have time enough to take stock of him. I saw that you were just the man for me." "Boy," suggested Ernest, smiling. "Oh, well, I'll make a man of you. By the way, an idea has just occurred to me. You'd better go to Sacramento with me tomorrow." "I should like to do that," said Ernest. "Then you can notice where I buy my supplies. You may need to go alone sometimes." "At what time will we start?" "The stage leaves at 7 o'clock." "I will be ready." Chapter 28 of A Cousin's Conspiracy, or A Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 28. Storekeeping. The journey to Sacramento was made, the goods selected, and in less than a week the new store was stocked. In the arrangement of goods Ernest took a zealous part. He had never served in a store, yet it seemed to come natural to him, and he felt more interest in it than in the work of mining. After the store was in full working order, Horace Ames left Ernest as sole manager, coming in only in the evening to look at the books, for Ernest as far as possible kept a record of every sale. Storekeeping in those days and in the country was unusually profitable. Ernest made a little comparison between the cost of goods and the selling price, and arrived at the conclusion that the average profits were 100%. And still the miners were able to buy goods cheaper than when they sent to Sacramento for them. At the end of the first week Ernest figured up the sales and found they had aggregated $200. His share of the profit amounted to a little over $30. This was encouraging, being 3 times as much he had ever realized in the same length of time from mining. There was one embarrassment. There was no bank in the place where money could be deposited, and of course the chance of loss by robbery was much increased. However, his partner purchased a small safe, and this afforded some security. One day a man entered the store and purchased a pipe and tobacco. He was a stranger to Ernest, but there was something familiar in his look, yet he could not place him. The newcomer looked about with considerable curiosity. "You have quite a snug store here," he remarked. "Yes." "Does it belong to you?" "I have an interest in it, but it belongs to Mr. Ames." "Is he here much?" "He usually comes in evenings, but he is interested in mining." "You seem to have a good trade." "What makes you think so?" "You have a good stock. You would not keep so many goods unless you had a call for them." "Have I ever seen you before?" asked Ernest abruptly, for the idea grew upon him that he and his new customer had met somewhere under peculiar circumstances. "I don't know. I don't remember you," answered the customer, shrugging his shoulders. "I haven't been in California long. I suppose you were born here." "No, very few of those now living in California were born here. I once lived in Iowa. Were you ever there?" "Never," answered the customer. "I've been in Missouri, but never in Iowa." "I have never been in that state. Are you going to stay here?" "I don't know. It depends on whether I can make any money. I suppose you don't want to hire a clerk?" "No." Ernest said to himself that this man with his shifty looks and suspicious appearance would be about the last man he would think of engaging. "Perhaps Mr. Ames would give you a chance to work some of his claims," he suggested. "I will look about me a little before I apply to him," replied the customer. "Did you come here alone?" he asked after a pause. "No, a friend came with me, Luke Robbins." The stranger started a little when Ernest pronounced this name, so that young Ray was led to inquire, "Do you know Luke?" "How should I know him? Is he a young man?" "No, he is probably about your age." "I suppose he came with you from Nebraska?" "Iowa." "Oh, yes, Iowa. He isn't in the store, is he?" "He is working for Mr. Ashton on one of his claims." At this point a new customer came in, and the visitor, after a brief delay, left the store. When Ernest had waited upon the new customer, he looked for the first visitor, but missed him. "I wonder who he was," he reflected, puzzled. "I'm sure that I've seen him before." But think as he might, he could not trace him. Yet with this man he had had a very exciting experience in Oak Forks, for it was no other than Tom Burns, the tramp who had entered his cabin during the night and robbed him, and later had attacked him when digging for Peter's hidden treasure. It had been only a few months since they had met, but Tom Burns during that time had grown a thick beard which had helped to disguise him. It is hardly necessary to explain how Burns had found his way out to Orville. It was his business to tramp about the country, and it had struck him that in the land of gold he would have a chance to line his pockets with treasure which did not belong to him. So fortune had directed his steps to Orville. When he entered the store in which Ernest was employed, he immediately, and in some surprise, recognized the boy of Oak Forks. He was glad to find that Ernest did not recognize him, and he immediately began to consider in what way he could turn the circumstance to his own advantage. "I wonder if the boy sleeps there," he said to himself. "If so, I will make him a visit tonight. Probably the money he has taken during the day will be in some drawer where I can get a hold of it." As he was leaving the store in the stealthy way habitual to him, he met a man walking toward the place with a long and careless stride. He started nervously, for this man was one whom he dreaded and had reason to fear. It was Luke Robbins, who, tired with working the claim, was going to the store to replenish his stock of tobacco. Tom Burns pulled his soft hat down over his eyes and pushed swiftly on. Luke Robbins halted a moment and looked at him. As in Ernest's case, he seemed to see something familiar in the appearance of the tramp. He realized, at all events, that he was a stranger in Orville, for he knew everyone in the mining settlement. "Who are you, stranger? Have I seen you before?" asked Luke, hailing him. Tom Burns did not dare to reply, for he feared that Luke might prove to have a better memory than Ernest. So he was passing on without a response when Luke, who considered his conduct suspicious, demanded in a peremptory tone, "Who are you? Do you live here?" Tom Burns shrugged his shoulders and said, disguising his voice, "Me no understand English, boss." "What countryman are you?" asked Luke suspiciously. "Italian," answered Tom. "Humph! You are the first Italian I have seen in Orville." "Si, signor," answered Tom, and this comprised all the Italian he knew. "Well, I don't think you will find any inducement to stay." "Si, signor," replied Burns meekly. Without another word Luke entered the store. "Ernest," he said, "I'm out of tobacco and must have smoke. Give me half a pound." "All right, Luke." "I ran across an Italian just outside. He seemed to be leaving the store." "An Italian?" queried Ernest, his tone betraying surprise. "Yes, wasn't he in here?" "There was a man in here, a stranger, but I don't think he was an Italian." "This man answered me in some Italian gibberish. He said he couldn't understand English." "What was his appearance?" Luke described him. "It's the same man that was in here just now, but he could speak English as well as you or I." Did you have some conversation with him?" "Yes. He looked familiar to me, and I asked him who he was. He said he had come from Missouri. He was in search of work." "You say he understood and spoke English?" "Yes." "Then I wonder what could be his game." "Don't he look familiar to you?" "Yes, there was something familiar about his appearance, but I couldn't place him." "He asked me if I couldn't employ him in the store. I told him Mr. Ames might give him a chance at mining." "Well?" "He said he would look around a little before deciding." "Did he buy anything?" "Yes, tobacco." "Did you mention my name?" "Yes, and he looked uneasy." "Ernest," said Luke Robbins with a sudden inspiration, "I know the man." "Who is it?" "Don't you recall any man at Oak Forks with whom you had trouble?" "Tom Burns?" "Yes, that's the man." "Why didn't we recognize him then?" "Because he has grown a full beard." "That's so, Luke. I understand now why he looked so familiar. I am sorry to see him here." "He'd better not undertake any of his rascalities, or he will find himself in hot water." Chapter 29. Of a Cousin's Conspiracy, or a Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 29. Tom Burns Makes a Call. When Burns left the store he walked to the outskirts of the mining settlement, not wishing to attract attention. He wished especially to avoid encountering Luke Robbins, with the strength of whose arm he was disagreeably familiar. He proposed to keep out of sight until night, and then make a visit to the store. It would go hard with him if he did not make a raise there, either in the shape of money or articles of value. He came to a cabin standing by itself at a considerable distance from the homes of the other miners. Sitting in front of it was a man with grizzled beard whose appearance indicated advanced age. There were lines upon his face that betrayed ill health. "I wonder if anything can be got out of him," thought Tom Burns. "I'll see." "Good day, sir," he said affably. The old man looked up. "Good day," he replied. "Who may you be?" "I'm an unfortunate man in search of employment." "When people are unfortunate there's generally a reason for it. Are you intemperate?" "No, sir," answered Burns, as if horror-stricken. "I hate the taste of liquor." "I'm glad to hear it." "I belong to 3 temperance societies," continued Tom, by way of deepening the favorable impression he thought he had made. "And still you are poor?" "Yes," answered Burns. "Once I was prosperous, but I was ruined by signing notes for an unprincipled man who took advantage of my friendship. Do you think I can find work here?" "I don't know. Probably you can get a chance to work on one of Mr. Ames' claims." "Is it Mr. Ames who owns the store?" "Yes." "I called there to buy some tobacco. Is the boy there his son?" "No, he is a recent arrival in Orville. He is a very smart boy." "Is he? Mr. Ames trusts him, I suppose?" "Yes. Why shouldn't he?" I would rather not answer that question." "Have you ever met the boy before?" "Yes, I met him in the East," answered Burns. "Since you have said so much you must say more. I am a cousin of Mr. Ames, and if you know anything unfavorable of the boy, it is your duty to tell me." "I have nothing against the boy, and would prefer not to speak." "I insist upon your doing it." "It is only this. When I knew him he was employed in a store. He was trusted as he appears to be here. One night the store was robbed. That is, some money disappeared, and the boy claimed that it was broken into by thieves, who took the money, whereas he took it himself." "That seems bad. Was it proved that he took the money?" "Yes. That's why he was compelled to leave the place." "Did you come here to expose him?" "No, I didn't know he was here. I was very much taken by surprise when I saw him in the store." "This is important. If true, Mr. Ames ought to be informed." "Don't tell him while I am here. The boy is very revengeful, and he might try to do me an injury." "Are you afraid of a boy?" "I am a man of peace. I don't want to get into any difficulty." "I suppose you wonder that I am sitting here while others are at work?" "Well, it did cross my mind." "My spine is affected. I look well, but I cannot walk. I hope to be better after a while, but at present I am comparatively helpless." "Can't I help you?" asked Burns. "You may go into the cabin and bring me a bottle of medicine which you will find in the cupboard." Burns entered the cabin gladly. It occurred to him that he might find something worth taking. On the wall, hanging from a nail, was a gold watch. It was too good a chance to be lost. It might or it might not be valuable, but at any rate it was worth something. So, while securing the bottle, Burns slyly possessed himself of the watch, which he slipped into his inside breast pocket. "Here is the bottle, sir," he said meekly. "Thank you. Now bring me a spoon which you will find on the table." Burns did so. "Now pour out a teaspoonful, which I will take." "I am glad to be of service to you. Don't you want an attendant while you are sick?" "There would not be enough for you to do. I have a son at work in the mines who is here morning and night, and he gives me all the care I require." "I am sorry to hear that," thought Burns. "The son may be dangerous." "Then, sir, I will bid you good bye. I will pray for your recovery." "Thank you. The prayers of the righteous avail much. Are you righteous?" "It isn't for me to say, sir. I don't want to boast." "That is creditable to you. By the way, are you hungry?" "I haven't broken my fast since morning." "You will find some cold meat and a loaf of bread in the cupboard. It is plain, but if you are hungry you will enjoy it." "Thank you, sir. I will accept your kind invitation." Tom Burns was really hungry, and he did justice to the food offered him. When his lunch was over he came outside. "Thank you," he said, "for your kindness." "Out here we are always glad to give a meal of victuals to a stranger who needs it. Are you going to stay long in Orville?" "If I can get anything to do I may. You see I am a poor man and stand in pressing need of employment." "Keep up your courage. Something will turn up for you. I will ask my son if he cannot find something for you to do." "Thank you, sir. I will bid you good bye, with thanks for your kindness." "If you are not pressed for time, I will send you on an errand." "All right, sir. I shall be glad to be of service to you." "Here is a Mexican dollar. You may go to the store and bring me a dozen eggs. If there is any change, you may keep it." "Thank you, sir." $1 in, thought Burns, as he turned away from the cabin. "I think I can turn it to a better use than spending it on eggs. That was a profitable call. I made a gold watch and $1 by it. The old man can't pursue me, thanks to his spinal complaint." "That is a very clever fellow," reflected the old man, when Burns had started on his errand. "A bit too religious to suit my taste. Still, he seemed grateful for the little I did for him. If he had a little more push and get up and get about him he would succeed better.
Why, he isn't more than 40, and he confesses himself a failure. Why, at 40 I considered myself a young man, and was full of dash and enterprise. Now I am 60 and tied to my seat by this spinal trouble. However, I've got something laid by, and, as old as I am, I feel independent as far as money goes." Half an hour passed, and still the old man found himself alone. His messenger had not come back. But there came up the path a tall, muscular figure, who greeted the old man in a bluff, offhand way. "How are you, Luke?" said the old man. "I was feeling lonely. I am glad to see you." "Have you been alone since morning?" "Not quite all the time. I had quite a long call from a stranger." "A stranger?" repeated Luke suspiciously. "What was his appearance?" The old man described Burns, and Luke knew him at once. "What did he say to you?" "That reminds me, he said he knew the boy whom Horace has put in the store, young Ray." "Did he?" "Yes, and he doesn't speak well of him." "What does he say about him?" "I don't like to tell you, Luke, for I believe he is a protégé of yours." "Don't mind that. If there is anything to be said unfavorable of Ernest, I ought to know it." "He says the boy robbed a store in which he was employed, and then pretended it was entered by thieves. It was on that account, he says, that the boy was compelled to leave the town where he lived and come to California." "Really, that is very interesting. To my own personal knowledge, the boy was never before employed in a store, and he came out to California with me." "Then what could the man mean?" "I can't say. I can only tell you that he is a professional thief." "Look, quick, Luke, and see if my gold watch is hanging on a nail near the cupboard." "No, it is not there." "Then the rascal must have stolen it. I gave him a Mexican dollar to buy some eggs at the store." "I don't think you will ever see it again, unless I catch the thief, as I may tonight."
Chapter 29. A Cousin's Conspiracy, or a Boy's Struggle for an Inheritance, by Horatio Alger, Jr. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Abigail Rasmussen. Chapter 30. A Burglar's Failure. If Tom Burns had been more prudent, he would have made good his escape with the money and gold watch he had already secured. But he was too greedy for gain. He pictured to himself the store with its goodly stock of money taken in during the day, and he felt an irresistible craving for it. There might be $100 or $200, and no one in charge but a boy whom he could easily overpower. Apart from the pecuniary gain, he felt that he should enjoy getting the best of Ernest, who had already foiled him at Oak Forks. "This time he will come out second best," chuckled Burns to himself. Then he laughed when he remembered how his appearance had puzzled Ernest. "It was a good idea growing a beard," he said to himself. "Seems to have disguised me pretty well. The boy thought he had seen me before, but he couldn't make out where. The next time he'll know me, I reckon. I must keep out of the way till night," he said to himself. "It won't do for me to be seen prowling round the settlement." He retired a mile or two among the hills and waited impatiently for night to come. "It is lucky that old man gave me a meal," he reflected. "Otherwise I should be about starved. I wonder if that watch is worth much." He examined the watch, and decided that its value was probably not far from $100. In fact, the old man had bought it in St. Louis, and had selected a high-priced article. It did occur to Burns that perhaps he had better remain satisfied with what he had got, for the watch would probably bring him $50 at a sacrifice sale,
But the temptation to stay was too strong. It would be a sin to give up such a fine chance, he reflected. There's next to no risk, and I may get $200. Then he began to consider what he would do in that case. He decided that he would go to San Francisco and see what pickings he could find there. He had already found out that mining men and others in the Far West were more careless about their money than those in the East, probably because money came easier. "I did well when I came out here," he said to himself in a tone of congratulation. "I'll make hay while the sun shines." Meanwhile, though he did not know it, his visit was expected, and preparations were being made to receive him. After supper Luke Robbins came to the store and held a conference with Ernest. "I'm going to pass the night with you, lad," he said. "I wish you would, Luke." "I want to help you do the honors to my old friend Burns." "Perhaps he won't call." "If he knows what's best for him he won't, but he will be like the foolish moth, and won't be contented till he has singed his wings. I will look about me and see where to bestow myself for the night." Ernest occupied a bed in the rear of the store, just behind one of the counters. It was near a window in the rear of the building. "I'll take that bed, Ernest, and you can find another place." "Shall I fasten the window?" "No. I'm going to make it easy for my friend Burns to get in. Whether he will find it as easy to get out will be another matter." Nothing was said to the miners about the presence of a thief in the settlement. At that time there was no toleration for thieves. The punishment visited upon them was short, sharp and decisive. The judge most in favor was Judge Lynch, and woe be to the offender who ventured to interfere with the rights of property. Had Luke breathed a word about Burns, half a dozen miners would have volunteered to stand guard, and would thus have interfered with Tom Burns' visit. "I want to keep all the fun to myself, Ernest," said Luke. "We'll give him a lesson he won't soon forget. If I told the boys, they'd hang him up in short order. I don't want to take the fellow's life, but I'll just give him a first class scare." It was about 10 minutes of 12 when Tom Burns, leaving his place of concealment, walked with eager steps toward the mining settlement. The one street was not illuminated, for Orville had not gone along as far as that. The moon gave an indistinct light, relieving the night of a part of its gloom. Burns looked from one cabin to another with a wistful glance. "I suppose some of these miners have got a lot of gold dust hidden away in their shanties," he said to himself. "I wish I knew where I could light on some of their treasure." But then it occurred to him that every miner was probably armed, and would make it dangerous to any intruder. So Tom Burns kept on his way. He was troubled by no conscientious scruples. He had got beyond that long ago. Sometimes it did occur to him to wonder how it would seem to settle down as a man of respectability and influence, taking a prominent part in the affairs of town and church. "It might have been," he muttered. "My father was a man of that sort. Why not I? If I hadn't gone wrong in my earlier days, if I had not been tempted by the devil to rob the storekeeper for whom I worked, and so made myself an outcast and a pariah, who knows but I might have been at this moment Thomas Burns, Esquire, of some municipality, instead of Tom Burns the tramp. However, it is foolish to speculate about this. I am what I am, and there is little chance of my being anything else." So he dismissed the past, and recalled the work he had set for himself. Everything was still. In the mining village probably there was not a person awake. It was like a dead town. Everything seemed favorable to his designs. There was the store. He could see it already. And now there was nothing to do but to get in and take the money, which he had no doubt was waiting ready to his hand. Perhaps he might be fortunate enough to secure it without waking the boy. He hoped so, at any rate, for he was not a desperate or cruel man. He did not wish to injure Ernest unless it should be absolutely necessary.
Arriving at his destination, he paused to reconsider. He did not expect to enter by the front door. He did not, as yet, know whether there was any other. But at any rate there must be a window somewhere, and he preferred to get in that way. He walked around to the rear of the store, and there he discovered the window. He had been afraid it might be blockaded with shelves. That would make entrance difficult, but fortunately this did not appear to be the case. He stood at the window and looked in. The faint moonlight did not enable him to penetrate the interior very far, but he could make out something. There were goods of various kinds scattered about, and he could just see a recumbent figure on a bed near the counter. "That's the boy," he said to himself. "I wonder if he is asleep." There seemed to be no doubt on this point. But for the indistinct light, Tom Burns might have thought the outstretched figure rather large for a boy. But he only glanced at it furtively. The next thing to consider was whether the window was fastened. In that case he would have some difficulty, though for this he was prepared, having an instrument by which he could cut a pane of glass, and thrusting in his hand unfasten the catch. But through some strange inadvertence apparently the window was not fastened, and much to his relief he had no difficulty in lifting it. He was as careful as possible, fearing lest he might stumble over some article, and by the noise betray his presence. What if there was a dog inside? This thought brought alarm to the burglar. In that case his visit would probably be a failure. He remembered, however, with a feeling of relief, that he had seen no dog about during his visit to the store during the day. Now that he had passed through the window and was fairly in the store, he looked around for the money drawer. He had not seen the safe, or probably he might not have entered the store at all, for he was not expert in breaking open safes, and at any rate it would be a matter of time and difficulty. So he was looking about when, as he passed by the bed, he felt himself seized by the leg. Evidently the sleeper had awakened and discovered his presence. Burns got down on his knees and grasped the recumbent figure by the throat. "Lie still or I'll choke you," he said fiercely. But as he spoke he felt the rough beard of a man, and with dismay he realized that he had tackled a more formidable foe than the boy for whom he was prepared. He felt himself seized with an iron grasp. "I've got you, you rascally burglar," were the words he heard, and gave himself up for lost. "Who are you?" he asked faintly. "I am Luke Robbins, and I know you of old. You are Tom Burns." End of chapter 30.